Hello, everyone. I'm Joy Coleman, Chair of the HRC, and welcome to the meeting today, May 15th. I'm calling this meeting to order, and Ellie, would you like to give some meeting information?
I can give the beginning
Avery,
information.
excuse me, Avery.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Please silence your cell phones to minimize distractions during the meeting. When the Chair calls for public comment, please approach the podium to indicate you wish to speak. Virtual participants should use the raise your hand function to indicate they wish to speak during public comment. Once your name is called, please unmute and turn on your camera to provide your comments. Please state your name and zip code before speaking. The primary format for accessing or participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored. If you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the Chair.
Thank you, Avery. Now we'll take a roll call of the commissioners. Commissioner Klein?
Present.
Commissioner Buchanan?
Here.
And Commissioner Cunningham?
Here.
And Chair Coleman is here, so Commissioner Dearborn is not yet here. All right. So today I see quite a few people here in the audience, and we're going to limit public comment to 3 minutes for each agenda item per person. And that is a one-time approach to the microphone for each different distinct item on the agenda. All right, getting into Part A of the agenda, communications. Have we received communications from other commissions, State Historic Preservation Officer, and the general public?
Yes, Commissioners, you received several communications that were posted to the packet yesterday and earlier this morning, and they were posted with the agenda items. So you'll notice, and I believe they were all for public hearing item number 1, and so those are included in the agenda item.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any disclosures of ex parte communications?
I'm disclosing ex parte communication with members of the public and the Lawrence Preservation Alliance surrounding the public hearing item number 1, the project on 700 New Hampshire. Really just information, sharing information, fact finding.
Yes, I also had a conversation with the owner of the property. He simply asked if I was going to be present at the meeting, and I said yes.
Okay. I had a conversation with Dennis Brown in regards to the chapter 22. He just needed a copy of it, so I printed off a copy and give him a copy.
I had no ex parte. I was way too busy.
Perfect. Any declarations of abstentions from any items by commissioners? Nope. Okay, hearing none. And do we have any committee reports?
We don't have any committee reports, but I did want to let you know that Steve Nowak and I have been working on the Rice-Dowdale markers, and we have hopefully convinced Bill Tuttle to write the text for the markers. And we asked the families if they wanted to have a remembrance space on the markers, and they both declined that and asked that it all be supportive history. And so those are moving along, and hopefully we'll have some more information for you in the next couple months.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to item B, consent agenda. Do I have a motion or discussion around the design review applications?
I move to approve.
I will second that motion.
Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries 4-0 for acceptance. Okay, Part C. Now, this is public comment time, so if there's any public comment to be had on things that are not on the agenda tonight, now would be the time to provide that comment. Okay, I will provide a little comment here. This is a great commission, and we have space for 7 people. And we have only 5 commissioners at present. And we are in need of an architect and a historian to round out the commission, which would provide diversity of thought and investment in our community that we live in and love. So if you do not enjoy the proceedings with only 5 of us, please apply. Thank you. All right, moving on to Part D, public hearing items. We'll go with number 1, HRC 250012.
Good evening, Commissioners. Lynn Braddock-Zollner, Historic Resources Administrator for the city. Your first public hearing item this evening is 700 New Hampshire Street. It's for new construction. It requires a certificate of approval and also a downtown design guidelines review. You have seen this project under another project number previously. It's been to the Commission twice now. It has also been to the Architectural Review Committee, and the applicant has tried to include all the recommendations from the Historic Resources Commission and from the Architectural Review Committee into a project that they submitted for your review this evening. Just to refresh everyone, this is the property that we're talking about. It is addressed 700 New Hampshire Street, but we're actually talking about the portion of the parking lot that runs along the east side of the property. It is in the environs of the McAllister House here at 724 Rhode Island Street. And then this kind of yellow color is the downtown overlay. This is a photograph of the existing site. Right here in the front where you see this parking lot is where the new construction would be. It would not have any impact on the historic stable wall. That would be maintained and hopefully part of a future rehabilitation on the site. And this is a look down Rhode Island Street to give you a feel for what the character of the area is. And the houses, and I thought we needed a little snow since it was kind of hot today. So, but this is to just give you an idea of what that National Register Historic District across Rhode Island Street looks like. And then you can see the McAllister House here. And this is the McAllister House. This was the initial proposal that was submitted that you saw several months ago, and I just put that in here so we can kind of have an idea of how the project has progressed and to be more compatible, mainly with the commercial district, but also with some commonality with the residential district. And this was the rear of the structure at that time. This is the proposed site plan. It has not changed since your last meeting, but it is important to note that from that original proposal, it has been set back from that north property line, and then also from this Rhode Island Street property line. There's an additional setback to the building. The parking lot has been redone a little bit so that you can see where the traffic will be, and And then the Borders building is down here, which will not be part of this project. This was provided by the applicant to help understand the setbacks from Rhode Island Street. We talked a little bit about this last time. Rhode Island Street has an extraordinary setback, and so there's a greater distance to the property line than you see in a lot of the East Lawrence streets further to the east. This also, the applicant is showing you the total setback here, and then the height here, but this is to grade, and so this approximately 32 feet is to the top, but it's at grade, so there's a grade change here, so you will add several feet in height over the height of the McAllister house, which is approximately 25 feet tall from grade. This was at your last Historic Resources Commission meeting, and I included this in so you could see the difference from that beginning design that was submitted after they worked with the Architectural Review Committee. They did all of these changes to try to help make the project more compatible with the residential district. And so they did things like increasing the setbacks, looking at an option with red brick, and looking at removing some of the balconies on the third floor, making the ends taller than the rest of the structure as recommended by the downtown design guidelines. Adding some architectural detail to the north and south ends of the structure that had been one of our comments, that it should be four-sided architecture, and then pushing back some of the brick. So since your last meeting and some of the comments that were made by staff and the commission, the applicant has made some additional changes that we had some concerns about. They did submit a project that had the option for a red brick. They did change the cornice detail a little bit to help the third floor balconies blend in better with the overall scale of the project as they narrowed this floor piece as well, the dimension of it to 10 inches to be more, to give you more of a feeling of this entire unit where this is a little bit larger and you're getting smaller as you go up. They also changed the direction of the slats that try to give some privacy to those third level balconies, and that helps give some separation to those individual units. And then they pulled back this wall right here an additional 6 inches. And I know when Joy speaks to some of the ARC things during discussion, the ARC had a question about how far back that portion of the wall really goes. This is an option that was submitted with the application too. It's the preference of the property owner to have the gray brick, and so they submitted that as an option for you to consider. The gray brick does not exist in the East Lawrence neighborhood, so staff has not been supportive of a gray brick building, but we will admit that with the bright color selections, it does blend with the gray brick. However, the red brick helps the building share some kind of context with the residential structures in East Lawrence that have red brick, and then also the majority of the structures on New Hampshire Street in this block face have red brick. So after looking at all of the design guidelines for the downtown area, staff is of the opinion that the proposed project meets the intent of the guidelines. We talked a little bit about this before. There's a big section in the guidelines that speaks to having commercial on the ground floor. which obviously this project does not. But staff is supportive of not meeting those guidelines to have commercial at the ground level because this faces the residential district. It is not facing into the commercial area, and those guidelines are really meant for those buildings that are fronting those commercial streets in our downtown area. And then also going through the certificate of approval, if you noticed in your staff report, this was very challenging because of the location of the proposed project. And it is a very transitional area, and trying to marry these two sets of guidelines and reviews when one is more for residential construction and one is more for commercial construction. So looking at the overall guidelines, going through one by one, we did that in your staff report, and staff is of the opinion that this does meet the guidelines, particularly because of the transitional area on which the property is located, and would recommend the use of a red brick. And if you recommend the red brick option, staff would recommend that you have that color approved by the Architectural Review Committee. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you. I have one clarifying question. When we review projects that fall under two different types of review, does one take precedent over the other, or are they equal?
One does not take precedent over the other. What you should do in your review is read actually two separate reviews, and you'll take two separate votes. Does it meet the downtown design guidelines would be one review that you do, and does it meet the design standards in Chapter 22 for the certificate of approval? So there are two different tracks. They both appeal to the City Commission if the HRC denies them. So we usually take it all together, but it is two completely separate processes.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions for staff?
I don't know if this question is for you or for the architects. I just was noticing again the sign that's in the middle of the street that says one way, you can't enter here. Would that sign remain or be removed?
As far as I know, and we can talk to the architect, but they have not submitted to our Municipal Services and Operations Department to change that one-way street at this point that I know of, or that sign. The street is actually two ways, but you just can't turn in on the 7th Street side.
Right, that's what, yeah. So that's what I wasn't sure if there would be a separate application for a change or to keep it as it is.
If they want to do that, they would have to go through a review process, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is the applicant present, and would you like to present?
Good evening. Paul Werner with Paul Werner Architects, and Adam Williams is here with me. I promise not to repeat everything Lynn has said. Awesome presentation. So let's at least start by why we're here, because last time we did discuss whether we just appeal this to the City Commission. We've been doing this a long time. One, I think we like the idea of incorporating the ideas that we would have done if we had had the chance to go to the ARC. So that was one reason for doing another application. We also worry a little bit if we go to the City Commission. No, I don't think they really love making these decisions. I think they'd rather this body do that. And with not having the chance of going to the ARC, enjoy having to leave the meeting earlier in last month, I could see us going to City Commission, then sending us back here, doing this again, and then going that direction if we have to. So anyway, I think our thought was, let's make the other changes that were discussed last month, let's bring it back and see where that gets us. So that's why we're here. Like I said, I will not repeat everything Lynn said. To elaborate that, again, this is, in our minds, this is not a historic preservation project. This is a project about developing a parking lot that is in a commercial district. And not even all of it is in the context area. So I really hope you guys all take a good look at the context area and what that really looks like. Since KT made it to the meeting, I would like to point out that while I really like Stan, we get along very well, and he was here last month, and I think if Mr. Hernley is against this, he probably would have said something. I would have said something about Dennis Brown as well, but he's already here, and he's got a good letter from the LPA. But just to remind the commission, you know, you only see probably 10% of the projects we actually do. 80–90% of them go through Lynn and or probably wind up on your consent agenda. So we actually do a great deal of work. I think we're over 50 structures in Oread neighborhood alone that have been saved. We've done a bunch of work in downtown and East Lawrence. So I'd just like to point that out, that I think we've done probably more work than you may be aware of. We understand the adjacent property owner's concern. But as they like to use the term, the community is already used tonight. I mean, this almost really does feel like a community project. For the people that still read the paper, if they read it in the last few weeks, the lack of the single-family home and the lack of housing is documented week after week after week. Mentioned last month, somebody that we don't even know stayed on the meeting just to talk about his friends that want to move downtown. For downtown Lawrence to survive as a destination, we simply need more people living downtown. The apartments are great, and it's certainly more people. And as we talked about, this could easily be 45 units, 60 unit, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments. But we'd like to think owner-occupied housing downtown is the better answer, and that's why what we are here to propose. Perceptions in the eye of the beholder. A couple of the letters you received commented on the project in the 1000 block of New Hampshire. So, you know, which is better or worse, however you want to look at it, a 4-story building that faces your backyard that's only 16 feet across the alley versus a 3-story building that, as Lynn already mentioned, on a right-of-way where the front doors face a front door and have an 80-foot wide right-of-way. In our opinion, the front facing a front and an 80-foot wide street is way less imposing than a 4-story building where people would stare at your backyard. We think our option's better. I've been doing this longer than I care to admit sometimes. You know, it really is a tough review sometimes when you have to keep your personal preferences out of the role. The role of the project is to meet the requirements that we have to follow and the design guidelines, as Lynn has pointed out. The only one I think we can really, that we don't meet, that has already been mentioned, is, for instance, meeting commercial on the first floor, which nobody wants. We didn't do a lighting plan. We don't plan on lighting up a parking lot that's on the other side of the buildings. But as you go through the guidelines, I think we meet everything. You know, some is only partial, granted, but when you go line by line, we meet the guidelines that is what we have to follow. Residential design can be very difficult as a design professional. Homes are very personal to people, as you can tell from some of the comments from the neighbor. For every person you can find that may not like it, you can find somebody that does. That's the nature of this. That is why we need to leave personal preferences out of the conversations. You don't have to love the project. You don't even really have to like it. I'd like you to like it. But we understand that we are expecting to develop based on the design guidelines, the building code requirements, and the land development code requirements. These all come into play with this project. Some of the examples of things we cannot do, as we mentioned last month, we cannot build single-family homes. We cannot build duplexes. I can put a basement under a garage, but there'll be no egress windows, which doesn't work. So I'd just like to point out a few of the guidelines, and then I'll be done. As mentioned in one of the excellent worded letters, is that context areas shall not be considered extensions of the designated landmarks or historic districts. The presumption is that a certificate of approval will be issued for a project located within the context area of a designated landmark or historic area if the project meets the standard of review. Buildings located on the corners should be anchor buildings and should be taller. New infill buildings should be multi-story in height up to and approve the appropriate limits. Corner buildings shall be a minimum of 2 stories in height. Taller buildings shall be encouraged. The downtown plan identifies this site as 2 to 4 stories. We picked 3. Again, we think that's the right answer. LPA's letter is correct. This project is a transition between commercial downtown zoning and a residential street. Transition zones can be difficult, which is why we picked 3 stories and not 4. I also hope, again, that you look at the context area map and see how much of the area of this is actually not in it. So I really hope you reviewed the staff report and LPA's letter and the context area map and find your way to support this. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there intentions of changing the street to entrance?
I don't think we have any thoughts on changing the street. It is, that did come out from one of the neighborhood meetings. I was very surprised to find out that technically it is a 2-way street. So if you park on Rhode Island and there are a few driveways, you can turn around and actually drive south. But as Lynn mentioned, the only way to do that is if you live on that section of the street.
Right,
Yeah, but I do not plan on changing that.
okay.
Yes?
I'm not sure if you can, I'll ask, how much value would be lost if the project were 2 stories instead of 3? Still with the underground garages?
Then you don't have a 3-story, then we don't have a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom unit. I mean,
So how many bedrooms could you put into 2 stories, I guess is maybe my better question.
1. So if you looked at the plans, I mean, you know, we can't win. If parking's important, we think that an attached garage is important. One of the major criticisms of Pachamama's building is there's 55 units and there's no parking. So we felt parking's important. That's the 1-car parking spot on the main level, have kind of a office area, main level of living's on the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor is the 2 bedrooms. I get that it is awesome that people want to live in 100-year-old houses, but it's also 2025. When these are listed at 2,300 square feet, that includes the garage. They're roughly 1,900, 2,000 square feet of living space, which in 2025 is not bad for a 3-bedroom unit, you know? I mean, our clients want 9-foot ceilings and walk-in closets and your master bathroom to be attached to a master bedroom and each bedroom to have a bathroom. You know, walk-in closets aren't a thing 100 years ago. Again, it's awesome if people want to live in a 100-year-old house. But there's other people that want to live in something in 2025. And again, I think the size of these are appropriate. They're not McMansions. I mean, 1,900 square feet is a reasonable size 3-bedroom unit. It just is. That's our opinion.
I have a
Yes.
question. Like you would walk through bedroom 1 to access bedroom 2, or is there hallway
There
access?
should be a hallway there.
Okay.
So stairwell up to a hallway, bedrooms on east and west side, bathrooms off the side, laundry room. Yeah. You know, laundry rooms, not a huge thing 100 years ago. You know, today people like a laundry room with room for a washer and a dryer and a place to hang up clothes and some cabinets, and, you know, that's what's expected.
One question on the position of the building in relationship to the street, so the setback. As you drive down the street today or stand on the street, you see, you know, you're on the street, you see the curb, you see some grass, you see the sidewalk, you see a stone wall,
Correct.
you see some more grass and a fence, and then the parking lot. So what are we anticipating the relationship there being and what's staying?
So we see rebuild, so curb and gutter, grass, sidewalk, the wall you see today, we see rebuilding that wall, but lower to like 28 inches because that wall is much higher than it has to be. So we're lowering that parking lot as much as we possibly can to keep the water that's coming off borders out out of the garages. So we see that as 28 inches, and then about 12 and a half feet of grass up to this patio, and would probably be 2 feet lower than the parking lot is today. Especially in the south, it slopes a great deal more to the north, but the south, we're going to cut that down as much as we can, which is roughly a couple feet.
Okay, and then the trees, the street trees along there between the stone wall and the curb, those,
The street trees stay,
Stay,
and we
you're
add a few
adding-
more, yep.
okay. All right, and talk to us about the changes from the original to now and the dividing walls between units, the brick wall on the first floor.
So we've minimized that brick wall. I'll wear you out on building codes and whether these are townhomes or multifamily, but so we've minimized that brick wall as much as we can and talked about stopping it right at the edge of the patio. We minimized it on the third floor. Right now, we're showing every other unit having a deck on the third floor or not having a deck and just covering the second floor terrace. We've lowered the parapet as much as we can. I mean, the big change, as Lynn mentioned, we narrowed up the deck on the third floor because it clearly looked too heavy, our fault, the last month. And as Brenna mentioned, cleaned up the roof on top of where there is a third floor patio. So I think the big deal was pushing it back off the street where the survey helped. We were off by a couple feet from the old aerials, which helped. So we're 3.5, 4 feet above the street. We're certainly not 5. Pushing it back helps. I can't push it back anymore, or then we lose the parking space behind the garage, and then we start a different conversation about losing parking. I think it's awesome that each unit technically has 2 spaces, one in the garage, one behind it. That keeps all of these cars off the neighbor's street. So feel that's more important than pushing this back any more space. So that may be one of the biggest changes that we've seen. But pushing it back and lowering it and shrinking the height as much as we can on the parapet, I think are the big changes, plus the materials, obviously.
And exterior HVAC, like conditioners?
On the roof, if we have them, you may see it would be on the west side of the building, but right now they're on the roof. Possibly on the north and south, but it would be on the side of just those 2 units, so nothing on the east side.
And the parapet would conceal those from view?
Yeah, the units are all in the back, so it would be on the far west side. Yeah, you won't see them.
Okay.
Yes,
So are you amenable to red brick versus gray?
I am amenable to red brick. I hope that's okay.
Thank you.
I've got a question on lighting. I assume you're going to be lighting around the front doors?
So and our response, I think it's, you have just like you do at your house, you have a light at your front door that you switch on and off. It's not on all the time. You may have one on the second floor at your patio, your deck. There are parking lot lights that now would be coming off borders, but that's on, the other side. But I think so our response was, I think it's residential lighting, just like somebody across the street wants to light their front porch or, but currently we don't show lamp posts or anything like that.
No, I was just thinking, as far as the direction of the lighting, I know there's some really cool, modern, more like stick kind of lights. I would just be conscientious of what makes it across the street. So that way people aren't feeling like they have to pull blinds because light.
Like I said, I think
figured
this
probably
is
not.
resident, you're sitting out on your own patio. I don't think you want to be blinded either. So
Yeah.
I feel like this is a little residential, but yes, good point. So.
And Commissioner Buchanan, just to clarify, we did or are in the process of reviewing a photometric plan with the associated site plan. So that is something the planning side of this is looking at too. The development code has restrictions about light spill and what you can be at your property line, so they have to meet that.
Yeah. Commissioner Dearborn, did you have something?
Well, I was asking about the photometric plan. Has there been any comparison done to the existing homes and how much light they're putting out versus what the new construction will?
We have not done any
It'd
comparison.
be really nice if they were more or less equal.
Yeah, I would almost think they would be. I mean, similar sort of lighting on porches and stuff, but we're not proposing any other exterior lighting on this side. Yes?
Yes.
How many people would fit on a porch? I'm thinking about parties. Just in
I don't know how
general.
good of friends are they.
I mean, obviously there'd be people in the house, you know, in the apartment itself, the living space. I'm just curious how many people would be on the porch, could fit on a porch.
How,
I mean, 6
Deep are
feet,
they?
6 feet. So, you know, a few. I don't think this is, you know, probably struggle with decks and patios a little bit for even, you know, all the ones that Hobbs Taylor have. I'm not sure you drive by and see, you know, 20 people standing out on their patios or decks. I think it's,
Well, again, we can't predict the future. I'm just asking, you know,
I mean, I think
many
that's, you
people
know,
can
you
fit
have a
on?
couple chairs and a table, and it's 4 people sitting out there. It's, you know, a husband and wife who lives there probably more often how it gets used, would be my guess. The reason why we have the one on the west side, which is attached to the kitchen, is for what everybody, you know, if somebody has a barbecue grill or something like that or wants to do anything like that, that's on the other side of the unit facing the parking lot, which seems to be a little bit more appropriate, which is also where if they want to go down to the ground floor, I think that all happens on the west side of these buildings, not on your front yard, right?
all right, so tell us a little bit about the journey through the zoning and the changes to the land development code. Has that impacted the development at all?
Not really, other than means I probably could get rid of all of the parking if I wanted to. Parking requirement would be 1 space.
It's in the CD district, so.
So it's actually none, yeah.
No requirement.
And that followed through, that none's required. CD didn't really change that much. The setbacks don't change because it's already 0, really. So no, I don't think so. It probably would affect more of the options on maybe the other uses, but not really.
Okay.
Good question, though. We were all still reading it and working through since April 1st. But
Right, and I
yes.
know sites like this are difficult because they are in between 2 drastically different uses and, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant?
No.
I'll be here. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any. So at this time, I'm going to remind everyone that we limited public comment to 3 minutes. So please, when you come up to the microphone, give us your name and let us know who you are. And then we will, Avery, or are you keeping time? Yes, Avery will keep time. But I know everyone can do this. 3 minutes. And we're going, in the last meeting, is my understanding that there was a little bit of chit chat between audience members and maybe some between audience and commissioners, and we're going to not do that today. If you need to talk, you can step out.
I'll start. Tony Peterson, 724 Rhode Island. I have a question about why, when this was presented again, there wasn't any sort of full elevation presented in the packet showing front, back, sides. All we got was a 3/4 3D shot. We have no idea. We have no reference for scale, height, how it relates to the rest of the neighborhood. That was my biggest concern. It seemed like a big misstep That's all.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Tim Nauman, I live at 714 Rhode Island. I guess I have a little, Mr. Werner's thoughts about let's just keep this professional and not personal. Like personal opinions maybe don't matter in this. And I actually, Mr. Werner did a great presentation. I can understand his viewpoint, but when you're living in these homes and you care about the historical preservation of it, and Tony, who just spoke, is in the McAllister house. I mean, if I'm not wrong, 150 feet environs, I mean, that it is in the environs. Also, I don't see how this meets the standard, the Secretary of Interior standard, the number 9 issue. I think you guys know what that is, but I don't see how. I feel like you can read it both ways, and that sounds like the committee's between a commercial viewpoint of this and a historical. And so I'm just, want to say my side from being over here is I don't understand a building of this size. It does not integrate into these buildings. And of course, you're not going to build single family. Of course, you're not going to do that. But it will be a visually huge building in comparison to this. And I feel like if this is why we're all here, and we've been here 3 times, and this is the part of what you all have dedicated on the commission have dedicated to do, as far as I see it, is to guide us, and thank you for letting me talk through this. I don't see how this building, where it sits, is meeting all of that. And we can bring up personal issues. I mean, that's just an issue that I think is my issue because I own the house here. So if that's personal, it is. But I also care about my neighbors. And I have lived in Lawrence for over 30 years, and I've lived about 5 of it on Mash Street and all over here. So I've been either on downtown or 2 blocks from it. And that's where my money goes, and I care about it. And I just don't see how this is a addition to what is great about Lawrence. I don't see how this keeps this block's integrity and helps support the cultural thing. So I'm not going to comment about any of the other stuff, and I don't want to make it personal. I really want to say I oppose this. I hope you can take that into consideration, that it truly, as someone who lives across the street, I don't see how this building in its iteration does all those things. I think there's versions of this. I think building downtown would be great. I'm not anti that. I'm not anti any of the people. It just seems too upfront and too there. And I think if it were pushed back like Hobbs Taylor was facing New Hampshire, it would solve probably all the problems concerning, I think, a lot of us on this side of the street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Katie Walsh. I live at 732 Rhode Island. And could this not be part of my 3 minutes? This is just to explain the one-way street. Could I just explain why it is, and because it was discussed? Anyway, we negotiated that when the awful Riverfront Mall was built, because the Riverfront Mall traffic was going to be dumped down our street rather than on 7th, New Hampshire, and Connecticut. And as far as I know, everyone still wants that one-way street, so that's a separate deal. I concur with what Tim just said, I think, and also what Tony said, that it's been difficult because we could not, and we asked many times from the architect for a perspective so we could see what it looked like, the whole structure, as you look down Rhode Island Street, so we could get some sense of the scale. As far as we know, it is very large. It is very rectangular, and it is too big in mass and scale for this area. I also wondered, since we are a National Historic District, it turns out, I guess, the State Preservation Officer may review any items that are federal. And so we have a question, probably for Lynn, as to whether this could go before the State Preservation Officer to talk about our historic district and how this project affects.
This has no required state preservation law or Section 106 review because there is no context area or environs for state or national register properties anymore. It's only within the district. And Section 106 review by the State Historic Preservation Program is only for projects that have federal funds or federal involvement.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it doesn't generate either a state law review or a Section 106 review, which are the reviews that the State Historic Preservation Office does.
Thank you. I think as our preservation laws get watered down more and more and more and more, someday the people that are fighting them, they're going to lose a building or a view that they dearly love, and they don't know how important these laws are. Finally, next Tuesday, the City Commission is going to discuss buying property to expand their offices, which is sorely needed. And apparently, one of the properties they're considering is the Borders property, the north side of this block. And so I'm just telling you that because what's going on? You know, are we going through all this angst for nothing? I think the neighbors would really like to know. And finally, if you put in more trees, it would be wonderful if they were pine trees, so there'd be buffer all year round. And the stone curbs are very important to East Lawrence, and we want to see them preserved. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Sarah Norman, 712 Rhode Island. I'm learning. Greetings, commissioners. I want to thank you for your time and attention. I want to apologize in advance for sounding like a broken record, but there are only so many ways to express the same concerns. As you've heard from me and read in my letters, I do not think this is the right project in the right place at the right time. I also have to say I was really disheartened that the developer submitted a new proposal with such small modifications to the design. It almost feels dismissive of your vote of denial at last month's meeting. Concerns that we have repeatedly shared about the proposal are height, width, length, and overall mass. This project is still too tall. Given the height, it is still too close to the residential properties across the street. There still aren't breaks in the structure. There still aren't enough architectural details that relate to the properties within the context area. There still aren't assurances for how the Donnelly Wall will be protected. There still isn't enough discussion about the possible impacts on the McAllister house. This still doesn't create a gentle transition between commercial and residential properties. This still speaks to a commercial design. Plainly put, this still doesn't work. Excuse me. I have heard concerns about what would happen if the HRC denies the project, it goes to the city commissioners, and then they approve. If this is still a concern, why can't this go back to the ARC with more specific requests to make the property compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features of the McAllister house and the context area as per Section 9 of the Secretary of Interior standards? Why can the focus not be on the Borders building first? I'm a bit baffled by the letter from the LPA. While well-written and informative in nature, everything in it speaks to them having a neutral stance on the matter, and there is no clear delineation of why they're in support of this project. How does their letter address preservation? What is their stake in the matter? If this project is approved by the HRC, it gives me pause, and I have to ask, why? I'm not an architect, preservationist, so please excuse me for being naive with my question. But is it fair to say the concerns vocalized by myself, my neighbors, other city professionals with whom we have consulted, and some members of the HRC itself are valid and should point towards significant changes being requested in this design? During the first HRC meeting, the developer said he had the neighbors in mind when this proposal was designed. If the neighbors are in mind, engage and involve us. Why can we not work collaboratively to come to some common ground? Wouldn't such an opportunity foster communication and neighborhood engagement while creating positive community relationships? Members of the HRC, I feel like this is your opportunity to enact positive changes regarding the transition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd Foster, 708 Rhode Island Street. I'm not going to read my whole letter again, and I hope everybody has, as well as the previous two. Just can't go on forever and continue to be redundant. But one thing that's changed since the last meeting was I started really taking a look at measurable effects on our neighborhood. And, you know, obviously, there's no denying that this project would make our homes on the east side of the block less desirable. And I followed those thoughts up with some calls to some appraisers, and I put that in the letter as well. So there's concerns because they automatically say it damages desirability and potentially value. And that's real. And I think there are options that could work, probably profitable options. As I mentioned, 820, 822 Rhode Island, beautiful duplex, sold for good prices, fits in perfect. In all our discussions with our neighbors, we've all came to the conclusion that we're not against development on that side of the lot, but we're against development that overshadows us. And you know, I think if they did something 2 stories, it could be a win for everybody. And I think it could be tasteful, and I think they could have gotten approval 2 months ago and maybe even broken ground by now. So, you know, I hope you really consider that. It's not that difficult to send this back, make some changes, work towards something that might be good for everybody. And thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, I do have a question for Todd, sorry. I apologize for not doing my homework. Do you happen to know who the earliest owner of your property was?
I think her last name, I think was Williamson. I'm pretty sure it was an Irish woman. 1890 is when the records say it was built, but
okay.
I think
Came
that's
later.
that's kind of you see 1890 a lot for these
Sure.
houses. And when I bought the house, you could see daylight through the roof. I put blood, sweat, and tears into it, and I've brought it back. I've stabilized it. It's standing strong. And in my trips through walls in the house and, you know, adding new electrical and insulation and such, I found burnt wood that's obviously been reclaimed and used to build that house.
Yeah.
Thank
Just
you.
haven't really.
Thank you
Thank
very
you for
much.
your
Thank
story.
you.
Commissioners, if we have supplemental questions that don't have to do with this project before us, I invite you to ask those after the meeting.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, I think if there's no more public comment, we'll close the comment for this item and move on to discussion between commissioners. Were you going to say something, Commissioner Cunningham?
Sure. I'm not, you know, this has come up at our March meeting and our April meetings, and I really don't want to kind of repeat everything that was said and discussed at those meetings. But I think one thing, just kind of as a point of clarity for everyone in here considering this, is that we're dealing with 2 certificate of approvals. One is the downtown design guidelines, and then the other is considering this project in the context of the McAllister House. And that I voted to reject the proposal at the last meeting. My stance hasn't changed, but I think that I would just kind of want to make clear kind of why I feel the way that I do. And I think that if we were to look at these kind of independently, if we were to look first at the downtown design guidelines and what they stipulate, they ask for buildings that are 2 to 4 stories tall, and this one is 3 stories tall. They ask that buildings on the corner be slightly higher, which this one fits in. It fits with all those requirements, but the downtown design guidelines require commercial space on the ground floor, which this doesn't have because it's a residential property. And so we're being asked by the applicant to kind of overlook that specific requirement because this is a residential property, which I understand in that regard, but it doesn't fit within the downtown design guidelines. If we were to set those aside and then look at this in the context of the McAllister house, there's a specific guideline that I think is really what kind of drives my stance on the matter, and that is within Chapter 22, Section 508, subsection C, where it looks at the design criteria for new construction. There's a number of things that new construction and additional construction should fit in, but the main two that I see having issue with this is height and massing. So number one, with height, it says the wording in the ordinance says new construction within the context area should be at or lower than the height of similar structures in the context area. This one is much taller than the historic structure. And then number two, the massing. The mass of the new construction should reflect the forms of the listed property and structures within the historic district. And so it does not align with either of those two. And I think that this is one of the public comments. Sarah, you said that you're learning a lot, and I think we all are, because this is with the updated city development code and the ordinance as it stands. It doesn't seem to take into account the context area when it overlaps with different zoning. When you have a historic residential property that is adjacent to commercial property. And I don't know if there is really much outlined in the way of transitional zones and what exactly that entails. And so it seems like this property meets some of the guidelines for both of these, but it does not meet the guidelines for any one of these uniformly. And so that's all I have to say, and that's kind of why, even though my stance on this matter has not changed, I think the opportunity to review this 3 times has better helped me understand exactly why and articulate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel when considering this project, a lot of those same things I see as conflicting things, which makes it hard to review the project because it is trying to do conflicting things and it cannot. And to be truly compatible with the historic structure that's listed, the massing would have to be much smaller because we're talking about smaller homes in that on that side of the block, right? But the area, the context area, also includes across the street where it is a parking lot and there is nothing to review it against except for openness. So it can't be, we know it can't be a single family, a small structure on a small lot because the zoning doesn't allow that. It can't be open and nothing because it is something. It is residential 100%, so it can't also be, or it's not also retail, and I don't think we want it to be that on this side of the street. And so when looking at the criteria, height, yes, it is 1 more story higher than the listed property and the houses in the context area. It is 32 feet. The house is 25 at the peak, but all of the 32 feet is all 32 feet, not just the peak. And it's on a hill, and so when we were rewriting 22, we talked about this a little bit. How do we judge? What are we judging the height against? Because what if the building's on a hill? Well, now we're on a little bit of a rise, and it's causing a little bit of a problem. So you can't write a code to address every single situation that might ever come up. It's not feasible, it's not possible. You would be writing forever, and then you would have something else that comes up that doesn't fit. And I think that's because we're smart people, and we see the rules, and we want to play hard, and we want to do things that are right on the edge, and we want to make a difference, and we want to make something that is not only good for ourselves and if it's our development, because everybody has to make a living, but also good for the community. We know that we need more units. Are these going to be owner-occupied units? I hope so. Could they be Airbnb? I don't know. I don't know the rules on that. Did they show us what the entire building would look like set on the street? Yeah, that was in last month's packet. It was in the month before that. I think it was in last month's. It was at least in, it was in last month's meeting.
At the very least, it was in the March meeting.
Was it not in the packet?
Where it showed all 4 sides of
The
it.
one with the measurement, we had the
street view?
The street view of the measurements, but we did not have an elevation showing.
A two-dimensional elevation?
Yeah.
And does anyone really understand what those mean except for Paul? Yeah. Well, I do, but, well, I believe those were up for an earlier design. We did have elevators.
Well, they're still in here,
They're still in here?
the one photo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not all 4 elevations are included in this packet.
Sorry.
Yeah, and it is typical that our agenda packets are made up with what is submitted that month, and if it's a resubmittal, then it does not include everything that was in the first submittal. Now, this is a first for me. I haven't seen a project submitted again under a different number. So should it have been the full packet? I'm not sure about that.
Well, staff didn't require a full packet because the actual size of the building hasn't changed, only the elevations. The setbacks have changed, and so the new site plan was included, but the size of the building, as far as the mass and pretty much the overall height, has not changed. And so we did not make them submit additional elevations to show no change.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk about them separately then. We are reviewing for adherence to the downtown design guidelines, and we also are reviewing for a certificate of appropriateness for being in the environs of a locally listed property. So when I approach this kind of thing, I try to think of them separately. I try not to put my own opinion or emotion into it, meaning that there's no criterion, L for like, and go by the criteria that's written on the page and look at it objectively. So when we look at the downtown design guidelines, that one's almost easier for me to review against because it does meet most of those guidelines. The one that it doesn't meet is the retail on the first floor, but I don't think we want it to. And then there was one other one that there were a bunch that didn't apply. So we don't review for that. It does, taking this as a separate issue in the downtown design guidelines, I think it is completely acceptable and meets all of the criteria that it needs to meet to be in the downtown design guideline district. So then we switch gears to, does it meet does it meet any or all of the criteria for being in the environs of the historic listed property, the house. And this one, I'd like to hear opinions, thoughts. It's hard to review. So I wasn't here last month, and I don't want you to restate everything that you stated, because I watched the meeting, I saw it. But any new enlightenments?
No, but I tripled my homework. I reviewed it again, very systematically. Do I like it? No. But does it meet the intent of the guidelines? Yes. And
Which guidelines? Does it meet, in your view, does it meet the intention of both guidelines?
all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think it's a transitional location, transitional site. They have a huge challenge of where we can review it separately, but you still have to design something that meets both the guidelines. And I think it's been a challenge for everybody involved. I like the changes and the feedback from the feedback, the changes that were made during the ARC. I think there's probably still a few more little details like color brick. I personally would rather see it be gray or something not red. I know red brings in a likeness to what's in a commercial district, but I think for what this structure is, it takes away from what this structure is trying to be. So for me, I'm kind of the opposite of you, Joy, where I had a harder time with the downtown design guidelines because it's so far from commercial. So I struggle more with the downtown design guidelines than I do the chapter 22. But since the presumption, and this is straight out of 22507, standards for review, item B, the presumption is that a certificate of approval will be issued for a project located within the context area of a designated landmark or historic area if the project meets the standards for review. And I think, does it meet them all clearly? No, but does it meet the intent? Yes. So my stance hasn't changed. I think they've done a good job of coming up with a solution that answers a lot of the concerns, especially with the parking, having the front doors face the street. I think the flow and the lifestyle of those living there are going to blend well into the neighborhood and with downtown. So I think as a transitional structure, this fulfills the guidelines, both sets of guidelines to the beyond intent.
Did you want to speak, David?
Please. I think everyone would like to see single-family homes covering up that parking lot or duplexes, whatever, and that would be my preferred choice. And that's just not going to happen. The zoning's not there. It's just not an option. The building itself, as proposed, I think they've done an awful lot of work to make it as compatible with the neighborhood as possible. It's a fine building. I have no issue with it in and of itself. If I lived across the street from it, as many of you do, I would have a real issue. I get it. I totally get it. But I don't have a solution for that. I feel that it meets the requirements, and I don't see what Plan B would be. If the buildings move further back, which would in effect lower its height a little bit, with more frontage, then you lose the parking. Everyone's going to park on the street, and then that becomes an issue. It's like every time one thing happens, there's going to be three other results of it. I hate to say it this way, but I think it's a good plan based upon the limitations of what's out there, because something's going to go there. That property is not going to stay vacant. Something's going to go there, and I think that having someone that's willing to work with the project and work with the neighborhood and try to work with us to make it as compatible as possible is a positive thing.
Thank you for the red brick. My image of red brick is that rust brick, not fire engine red. Pine trees are a fabulous idea to keep needles on the trees in the winter. I, too, continue to side with the neighbors. I believe it ought to be 2 stories instead of 3. History is important. I think that the 700 block of Rhode Island is crucial. In addition to the McAllister House, I think all those homes are important. And I lean on the side of the of not meeting the intent of Section 22, 507, 508. Simply too tall, too large, and offensive to the neighbors across the street. And if we're going to break rules on the downtown guidelines and not have commercial, thankfully, yes, we're between a rock and a hard place. The transitional site of this project is the street. That's as far as I can see it. So that's where I'm at.
I would add that when you drive down the street and see the progression of the lots and the grass, the sidewalk, and then the buildings, they are a little back a little bit further from the street than on other blocks. There is a little more space there. And when we were reviewing this proposal and we talked about how close it was to the street the first time and pushed it back, we felt like the edge of the parking lot, what it is today, was a good place for the main facade, and they've done that. They've continued the line of the stone wall. And so there's some space there between the stone wall and the facade. If I could change one thing, which I don't think I can, because Paul will tell me it's against fire code, is I would make the walls in between the units more permeable, not so heavy, but I don't know that that's possible. Yeah, so it's a hard one, and I don't think anyone's position has changed, but we will find out when we vote. So, any other questions for staff or discussions? Anyone want to give a motion on one of the two?
I guess I have a question to pose to the city. One of the public comments was that this property is being considered to be purchased by the city. I don't know where that's at, how the veracity of that claim. If that is something that the city is considering, would it be possibly appropriate for us to defer this until that decision is made?
That would be up to the commission. I did have the opportunity to speak to the engineer from MSO who is in charge of the City Hall Annex project, and he explained to me where they are in the process is that they have a couple of sites that they're looking at and doing due diligence on. He did not say that they were going to the city commission on Tuesday night. He said he had no idea at the time which one staff would recommend to the city commission, that they're just that early in gathering all the material for both of the sites that they're looking at. Okay. And so I'm not a fortune teller. I can't tell you, if the city is going to be interested in this site. It all depends on what all those studies come back with. And, I just don't know.
Okay. It sounds like they have several properties that they're considering.
They have not made any decisions yet.
Okay. So it probably would not be appropriate to defer this. That's my only question.
Yes, I'll make a motion to find that the proposed project meets the intent of the standards of review in Chapter 22 and issue a certificate of approval for the proposed project I guess with the condition that the final brick color gets approved by ARC or the administrator? Which?
Probably ARC.
ARC. I guess we did not, can I put my motion on pause? We didn't fully discuss or even have the applicant clarify if the brick is pulled back to be coplanar with the edge of the balcony. I thought it was.
Yeah, he said that.
But, okay. Okay, great. Resume motion. I guess that's the end of it, because you clarified that, yeah.
You want to do these one at a time? Okay.
Yeah.
I second that motion. And now we'll take a vote. Commissioner Klein?
Nay?
Oh, I guess I don't have to do that, but,
You can just do
Yeah.
all
Oh.
four.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed?
Nay.
Nay?
So motion carries 3-2.
Okay.
Thank you. Good luck.
You have to
Well,
do the
yeah.
And we do the downtown guidelines.
Well, good luck with that.
Halfway there.
I make a motion to find that the proposed project meets the intent of the development and design guideline standards for the downtown design guidelines and for the downtown overlay district.
I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-2. Now, good luck with your project. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to second item on the public hearing agenda, HRC 250008.
It's a poor little garage.
So this is usually when I put my sad face on, because several years ago, Dennis Brown and I think Brenna might have been part of this group too, were looking at how many accessory structures we're losing in our historic areas. And one of the challenges with historic accessory structures is that most of them were never built for longevity. They were usually lesser materials. A lot of times in Lawrence, they didn't have foundations or floors. And so here we are again tonight with an accessory structure at 1312 Vermont Street for a demolition. It requires a certificate of approval, and it also requires Oread Neighborhood Design Guidelines review by the commission because the structure is over 50 years old. This is the project location here, and this kind of light blue box is 1312. This is the listed property for the certificate of approval. And then the whole kind of yellow area you see is the overlay district. This is an existing site plan of the property. Several years ago, there was a rehabilitation project done on the main structure, and at that time, the owner was trying to save the accessory structure and to continue use on it. That has not proved to be an idea that can carry forward, and so this is the structure we're talking about now, and even looking in the aerial, you can see there's a little bit of lean to it. This is the existing structure. It's a very simple wood frame structure, but it has had significant deterioration over time. It's not as bad as some that we've seen, but what you can't see in a lot of the photographs is the lean to the structure is getting to the point where it needs to be addressed. When staff looked at it to be able to rehabilitate this structure, you would need to try to stabilize it, lift it off of its existing location, pour a foundation, which it doesn't have currently, and then try to put the structure back on and then straighten the structure. As you saw in the interior photographs that were in your packet, that's probably not a process that's going to be very successful, and it would be very expensive. This is showing the other elevation. Like I mentioned, it's a very simple structure. One of the sad things for me is the type of siding it has. It's like the shiplap siding, and we don't have a lot of that left in Lawrence. But it is in poor condition at the ground level. The roof would have to be completely replaced. There is wood rot. In this photo, you can see a little bit of that lean that I was talking about. When you take a photograph, you automatically try to make things center up, so you can't really get the full visual of what it's like. But you can see inside that it does not have a floor, and it's no longer useful for them to even store things in. The ultimate plan for the property is to rebuild a structure of similar size in this location, but there are other projects that have to be determined and cost out before that can take place. And one of them is a city-initiated project that the property owners in this area are having to participate in. So that is why we're not talking a lot about the new construction at this site. Although they did submit the plans of what their intent is, it's not going to be immediately. So staff went through the standards and guidelines for accessory structures. It doesn't speak specifically to the demolition of accessory structures, so unlike a primary structure, you don't have to find whether or not it's character defining for the neighborhood. And staff was of the opinion that the current condition of the structure warrants the demolition. Similarly, for the Oread Neighborhood Design Guidelines Review, because of the condition of the structure, staff is requesting that you approve the proposed project. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions you might have.
Do you happen to know the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you happen to know the general years that these accessory structures were built in the in this neighborhood?
In the Oread neighborhood,
Yeah.
it ranges from the early dates all the way up into the end of the context period, which was 1945, I think. So, I mean, we have some, we've actually looked at some that were built in the 60s. So, you know, that hits that 50 mark now too. So they range just like the buildings.
Yeah, I'm thinking, you know, no foundations because it was primarily dirt roads. You know what I mean? So you just leave your garage as dirt floor, and then, anyway, I'm just trying to
Gravel
imagine that. Yeah, gravel maybe.
after.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Lynn. As I look at this structure on Google Maps, I see that there's a short wooden fence behind it. Will this demolition knock down that fence? Is that on your property or the adjacent?
It's on the division between our property and the one.
Okay, but it's going to be unaffected? Okay. I guess that was probably a better question for you, but thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to say anything?
I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you.
I have one quick one. Has there been any thought about reclaiming the wood?
I do tend to reclaim wood. I mean, I've built a whole lot of tables out of the wood from the different properties.
Shiplap is nice stuff.
Yeah. This, actually, somebody had gone through and taken the original roof off and put trusses. So at some point, probably within the last 25 years, I would say that, you know, a third of the original structure was taken away, and that's all, you know, like I said, they're on 2-foot centers up there, and that's contributed to a degree the deterioration of the roof. But,
And good question, just to follow up on that. On the application, there's a page here that has the material list. Is that the materials that you hope to kind of reclaim from it?
No, the material list would be what we would be using to rebuild a structure.
Okay.
And Lynn mentioned, in fact, we just got a letter emailed today that we have a house in the 1100 block of Kentucky that we found out that there is no sewer that runs behind those properties, that they all tie into a main sewer on Vermont Street. So we just got a bill for $6,000 today just to do the engineering work on it. That, and we're going to have to pay more expenses as that sewer is put in. That was the reason that I, was not immediately wanting to build this. We wanted to build the structure, and then we found out about this problem that we knew nothing about. So.
Right now, the structure is really not being used?
It's not, it's got a dirt floor, and it really isn't, it's not waterproof enough that I would feel like we could store stuff in there.
Thank you.
Although I never favor taking down accessory structures, I think this is one that, let's get it down before it hurts somebody.
Let's hear if there's any public comment.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Sorry, I just made the assumption.
Yeah, I've done it before.
I just want to point out really quickly that we had a similar request for the demolition of the garage next door at 1308 Vermont that came across our November meeting, and it was, I think, a very simple. It looks unsafe. It doesn't look like you would want to go in there to retrieve anything, and that it just does make sense to go ahead and demolish it, even though it's within the context area of. Is it the tea room?
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's, it's on a different block. It does not affect what you would see, from Mash Street.
And I thank you for providing what your intent is when you do have the funds. I appreciate your intent because I do think it is very appropriate. You're not trying to do a 1.5 story something. Like, I appreciate your intent.
Of what's there.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that.
We love that.
More permanent.
Yes. What's hard when your footing is about less than 12 inches thick, and most of that's sitting on top of the ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, if we are done with discussion, do I hear a motion?
I move that we find that the project proposed meets the standards of review in Chapter 22, Section 22507, and the design criteria in Chapter 22, Section 22508, and issue the certificate of approval.
And? Can we do both of them?
Oh, can we combine the Oread guidelines and certificate of approval?
It's better if you do them as separate.
Okay.
Well, I second your motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And?
Right. I make the motion that we find that the proposed project meets the development and design standards of the Oread Neighborhood Design Guidelines for the Oread Neighborhood Design Overlay District.
I second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Good luck with all your projects.
Yes.
Yeah, I would prefer doing ones that we know we need to do rather than the ones that just kind of come at you from, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our public hearing items. Are there any miscellaneous items tonight?
I do have one miscellaneous item for you. I mentioned this, I believe, last month. 1007 Rhode Island Street is a brick structure that was stuccoed at some point, and it is literally collapsing. Staff has used the emergency clause in Chapter 22 to approve the certificate of approval as an emergency, and the code official has agreed that it is unsafe and dangerous and harmful for the community for this structure. We also sent the state law review to the State Historic Preservation Office to expedite a state law review. They found that even though it's in terrible condition, the demolition of the structure actually does damage because you're literally damaging the structure. And so they found that it damages the historic district. So the next step in that process is for the city commission to make a determination based on all of the relevant information if there is a feasible and prudent alternative to the demolition of the structure, and if all planning has been done to minimize harm to the historic district. And we have scheduled, we're pushing that through as well. That hearing will be on Tuesday night's City Commission agenda, and hopefully the property owners have fenced the structure off. They have cameras inside and out, and they're watching people still get into the structure. I will tell you, and I've had a very lengthy career, we won't say how many years, it is one of the worst structural conditions I've ever seen. You will rarely find me, particularly for a listed building, say that it cannot be rehabilitated. And this is one structure I don't think it can, because it's a brick structure and the walls are actually collapsing behind. It was stuccoed at one time, and when they stuccoed it, they scored the brick. And so the brick is collapsing, the stucco is falling off, and now the brick is falling down. So parts of the walls are actually falling down. And in the rooms where you still have some plaster, you can see the huge, their structure movement cracks. They're not like the little kind everybody in Lawrence gets above the door frame when you have swelling and drying out of soils. I mean, these are very serious cracks. It is, they did a structural evaluation by someone who is like-minded with me that you can rehabilitate anything if you spend enough money on it. The problem with this one is you can't reuse the bricks, because their structure has been compromised by the scoring to add the stucco. And there is also no way to stabilize one wall and work on the adjacent wall because all of the walls are collapsing.
Oh, wow.
So we went through a very long site visit and tried to come up with any kind of reasonable project that would work in Mike Myers with Hernley was there, and I was there, and the structural engineer was there, and we couldn't. I can find no way to save the structure. So that's why we're expediting it, because there is a safety issue with people getting in it.
What is the address?
It's 1007 Rhode Island.
I'm looking at it. From the outside, it's a sweet-looking house, but you can see it's falling.
It's so cute.
So is there any way of saving the gingerbread?
Well, we did look at that, and what you can't tell in that Google photograph is there's a lot of wood rot.
Yeah.
So when
There's no wood whatsoever that could be saved?
When they're taking it down, they're going to see if there is any of that.
You know, like,
they can
as
save.
opposed to just a whole bulldozer tearing the whole thing down. I'm just wondering if there's pieces that can be, like the doors
If
or
they
anything
can do it
that can be-
safely, yeah.
That can be salvaged.
Yeah, they are going to look into that. We did
Okay,
have that
great.
discussion.
Yeah, and kill the couch.
What happened?
That is too
And they do plan to rebuild on the site, so that will minimize the harm to the historic district. They just have not finalized their new building plans, because the original intent was to rehab and live in this house.
And it's listed, so there's documentation about what it was, what the current structure is, and
Yes, and they took I can't remember, it was over 100 photos, and those have all been uploaded into KHRI, as well as the structural analysis and everything that we found when we toured the structure.
Yeah.
Is this a result of natural decay, or is this like vandalism by the people that are breaking it?
No, it's actually the natural decay and lack of maintenance to the structure
Okay.
and some really bad decisions along the way on how to try to maintain the structure.
I mean, I know we've talked about this before in terms of how can we prevent demolition from neglect, but so much of it is landlords who are not maintaining. And there's no accountability for that, which leads to this.
Well, and this one would have been really hard because, as
Yeah.
some of you know, stucco can hide
Yeah.
the worst conditions for a historic
you-
building.
It's the stucco
And
that caused the.
certainly this one, the stucco was holding it up.
And the installation of the stucco damaged the brick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which all lets water
Yeah.
into the walls, and then it freezes and thaws and does all kinds of crazy things.
So, and as you can see from the exterior that was on Google, it doesn't look that good now, but, I mean, it doesn't look bad. It's like, oh, I can fix that, kind of thing, but,
Well, when I look at the images on KHRI, it says it was listed in 2004. I'm presuming that the photos are from 2004 too, which is like,
I think the photos actually were from the East Lawrence survey, so I think they're earlier than 2004. There may be a date on them, I'm not sure. It was listed as part of the district.
okay, yeah, I see. There's the ones that are from last month, and then
Well, thanks for letting us know.
2012, yeah, that's a shame.
Would you accept public comment?
Yes, please.
I just didn't want y'all to see it on City Commission
Yeah.
Tuesday night and think,
What the heck?
What the heck, Lynn?
I had been wondering because we weren't seeing a demo permit or anything. But there is an interesting story, maybe something fun to end the meeting with. LPA was looking for a project house in 2011 and maybe into 2012. And we were looking at this house. And it was one of those deals where you go inside and you put a marble on the floor and it just goes all the way away from you. And there was a lot of, it was like, wow, somebody had been living in this house recently. But it was owned by a divorcing couple, and both of them claimed they owned the property. So we really didn't know who to work with in terms of purchasing it. And we were kind of concerned anyway, and we did realize that the stucco process had scored the brick, and we were advised at that time, so 12, 13 years ago, that, the brick walls, you're not going to be able to work with them. So we walked away, but, there was a group of us over there several times, and people wondering, what are these guys doing? And they asked us, and we said, well, we're looking for an LPA project. And one of the folks said, you should talk to Rod Ernst about the Turnhalle. I was in Turnhalle a few days ago, and he'd gotten a letter from his insurance carrier listing all the things that he had to do at the Turnhalle, or he was going to lose his insurance. So we started talking to Rod, and it took about a year of careful negotiations with Rod, but we did end up buying the Turnhalle. So to me, it's kind of a lesson, like when you're looking for something, people just kind of notice that you're out there. So you might not find what you were looking for, but they'll help you find something else.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Okay, any other miscellaneous items? All right, then we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Apologies for being late.
That's
I
completely
Couldn't
understandable.
make it happen.
Yeah. You made the good stuff.